Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Hero Show. We are at the IIC Platform for Industrie event in Germany, and with me I have
Ian Skerrett from the Eclipse Foundation.
Ian, what's the Eclipse Foundation?
We're an open source community. We host over 300 different open source projects. Lots of people know of Eclipse as being a really good Java IDE, but we actually are a community of open source projects. And for this event, we're talking about our IoT projects. So we have 26 different open source projects focused on IoT, and specifically around things like standards and frameworks for IoT solution developers.
Okay, we don't hear a lot talked about open standards really in IoT. I think it's a discussion that's starting to be had, but it's fundamentally, I think, a very important one.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I've been doing this going on 5 years now, and I think it's getting better. I think when I first started out, all the IoT solutions were very siloed. Nothing would talk to anyone, all based on proprietary formats and proprietary protocols, and we're getting better in terms of, I think even this morning we heard about a lot of the executives talking about the importance of standards, importance of open standards, and that's really how you get interoperability. And kind of if the Internet's going to be, if the Internet of Things is going to be successful, you need to get that interoperability of the solutions and of the messaging and of the data.
Well, let's take a step back. Do you think the Internet of Things is going to be successful?
Sure, I really do. I think we're already seeing some good examples of that. Some discussion today, but it's certainly, there's a lot of hype. We've got a long ways to go to make it kind of really entrenched in our world, and certainly in the IT/OT fabric. But we're moving in the right direction. So I think we're certainly going to get there.
And why is open source important to that?
Well, I think it's. I like to talk about kind of we need to learn from our history, from the internet, and if the Internet of Things is going to be successful, why is the internet successful? And I would say the internet is successful is because it's based on open standards and open source implementations of those standards, right? So kind of Apache web server and Linux run the internet, right? And so we need to get to the process of where a really good open standard and a really good open source implementation of that standard is available, and that's how you get adoption. I think kind of the SAP executive today made a really good point where adoption drives a standard. Right, and so we need to, again, that's really where open source comes in, is it lowers the barriers and makes adoption a lot easier.
And where are we on that journey?
I think we've come a long ways. So an example in the Eclipse community is around MQTT. So it's a messaging protocol that IBM and Eurotech created back in the 90s. No one ever heard about it, used it. 5 years ago, and they decided to do an open source implementation of MQTT at Eclipse, do the standard at Oasis, and now basically if you look at any IoT platform provider, they're all talking MQTT, right? So I think it's a really good example of what we need to get to, and how you can get there using open standards and open source. I think, but it's just one standard, right? And there's not going to be one standard for IoT. There's going to be lots, right? And so we need to kind of work on what are the other ones that we need to kind of move forward on.
And how do we get the interoperability between standards?
Well, it's like if you have MQTT systems, right, can talk to each other. And so if you have a client that's talking to MQTT, you don't want to get locked into just the back end that's talking to MQTT. So, for instance, like AWS IoT speaks MQTT, Azure IoT speaks MQTT, so you're starting to get a bit more flexibility in terms of moving between different back-end providers, and I think that's kind of the starting point of interoperability. It's not the end point, right? Because there's certainly issues around kind of data formats and stuff like that, but it's certainly the starting point.
Okay. What are the biggest challenges you see to the industrial Internet of Things or the Internet of Things going forward?
There's many. I think actually one of the things I think that a lot of people don't talk about is skills, right? Is that like, just to get an industrial IoT solution, you need to be a hardware person, you need to be an embedded software person, you need to be a networking person, right? You need to be a subject matter expert, right? You need to kind of understand the cloud, the data analytics. So putting together the skill set, I think, is a huge challenge for a lot of people. And a lot of people will talk about kind of it's OT and IT coming together, and I think that's really kind of getting those worlds coming together and talking to each other and having the same language is one of the challenges. I think there's certainly challenges around security that still need to be resolved. My pet peeve is that not enough people are working on security, right? And certainly not in open source, right? So I think we need to kind of get going on that. But I think kind of once we get the skills going, I think we'll be making progress.
Fantastic. Ian, that's been great. Thanks a million for talking to us today.
It's good to see you, Tom.
Cheers. Nice one.